Hello, everyone. It is Friday, March 27th, and our devotion for today, we're going to continue looking at the family of Abraham and Sarah and their son Isaac and his sons Esau and Jacob. And we're going to look specifically at the life of Jacob and what happened between him, his wives, and his children. Jacob, if you remember, we talked about this yesterday, was tricked into marrying someone he didn't love. He had to work an extra 7 years in order to gain the hand of the woman he loved. Eventually, he would get into a very messy situation about children, and he would have children through multiple wives. This was not a good decision for him. But the end result was that he had many children, many sons, but two of them, Joseph and Benjamin, were the natural born children of the woman he loved, Rachel. Rachel died while giving childbirth to Benjamin. And so Joseph did what many people do in his situation, but it wasn't a good decision. All of a sudden, he became very possessive of Benjamin and Joseph, and he loved those children more than he did his other children. He did this because they reminded him of the woman he loved, and the other ones reminded him of the injustices that had been done against him. Now, many of you know the story. Joseph's brothers were very jealous because their father loved him more, treated him, gave him the best of everything. And so what they really wanted was to be loved and noticed by their father. So they come up with this plan to sell Joseph into slavery, which they do. And this does not result in them getting more love or more attention from their father. It results in their father closing himself off with a little baby Benjamin, not letting him out of his sight. Joseph, meanwhile, has tremendous injustices done against him. He's sold into slavery. And while he's in slavery, let's pick up the story. You see, while he's in slavery, he winds up working for a man named Potiphar. And while he is there, he has the opportunity to do what is right or to act selfishly in his own interest. It would have been easy for Joseph to have said, the world has just done horrible things to me. There's so much injustice done against me. I have not been treated fairly. It's time I get my due. It's time I get something. Something good ought to happen to me. And he could have turned inward and been angry and bitter at the rest of the world and become a selfish person that just looked out for himself. But Joseph didn't do that. He kept honoring the person who he was forced to work with. He did his job well. And when time came for him to do to think of himself or to lie and to cheat and to steal or to do something else, he refused to do it. He wanted to stay true to what was right instead of becoming the kind of person that looked out only for himself. Now, we don't know all the circumstances. How is it, having been sold into slavery, he could develop this kind of character? But the one hint that we have about why Joseph remained faithful and true to who he was and to not give in and become corrupt was God went with him wherever he was. When he was sold into slavery, God was with him. When he refused the advances of Potiphar's wife, and as a result, another injustice was done against him, and he was put in prison, it said, and God went with Joseph to prison. Somehow, Joseph realized, I think this has to have played a part in Joseph understanding that even though circumstances of this world were working against him, even though there was injustice, even though there was pain being done against him, even though his family members were betraying him and he was being sold into slavery, even though there was false accusations, God was still going with him. And somehow that made the difference to Joseph. Now, this seems like this is a repeated theme. If I look back over all the devotions we've been doing the last 2 weeks, it seems to me that recognizing that God is still with us and trusting in God has been key to not allowing fear to overwhelm us. It's also, I think, a key to not becoming the people whom we hate. You see, it's easy in these times when we're struggling, when we feel disconnected, to cut corners, to do something that we thought we would never do, to cheat, to steal, to slander, to take advantage and say something awful against somebody in our own family whom we live with. It's easy to not do the right thing and become the selfish versions of ourselves. But if we take a moment to stop looking and being obsessed or overwhelmed with our circumstances, if we take time to take our eyes off ourselves, we realize that even though we're stuck at home, God is with us. Even though we've been sheltered in place, God has gone with us to our places of shelter. Even if we are stuck doing 3 jobs because 2 other people can't do their jobs because they're off someplace else, God is still going with us. No matter what is happening circumstantially in our life, God is still going to be going with us. That's one of the promises that we have. And the more we contemplate, the more we realize that God is still with us, the more we understand how important it is to be true to ourselves, to not allow our selfish versions to take over, but instead to continue to understand our lives are meant to be a blessing to others around us. I know it seems like I'm repeating myself, at least it feels like that to myself, but this is a lesson that we have to learn over and over again. And I can't think of a bigger example than the life of Joseph, when so many injustices had been done against him, when he had been abused, sold into slavery, when he had been thrown falsely into prison. He still worshiped God. He still remained close. He still felt and saw and acknowledged in somehow capacity that God was going with him. He still used his gifts and his blessings from God to help others despite the circumstances he was in. I think it's helpful for me to realize that even though Joseph was unjustly thrown in prison, he still used his spiritual gifts. He still thought of his life as being a blessing. And so he helped other prisoners. He helped even people in power who didn't deserve it. He continued to help others. And if he could look at being thrown into prison or thrown into slavery and say, I can still be a blessing to others. I can still be true to myself. I don't have to allow those circumstances to bring about the ugly version of me. If Joseph could do that in his circumstances, then I think certainly I can do that as I shelter in place. Stay tuned for tomorrow when we look at the scene of forgiveness, how Joseph is reconciled with his brothers. In the meantime, take care, look in on those who are most vulnerable. Take care of those who God has brought into your circle, those people whom you know that need a helping hand. This Sunday, once again, we'll have an online-only worship service, and it'll be at 9 o'clock. Until then, God bless.